Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I've entitled this podcast, Don't Make It So Hard. Look, since you're my listener, I'm going to be talking to you directly. When you're having a breakdown in your relationship, then somebody is going to have to be the catalyst to get things working again. So it means somebody's going to have to stick their neck out and give it a shot. You're going to have to say, hey, what is going on? And, that can be hard to do. Why? Because it's being vulnerable. And being vulnerable is hard to do. Hey, you know what? We're in a relationship. So that's what it's about, vulnerability. Hopefully you did your homework. You've listened to all my other podcasts. And you've asked the right questions. So you've figured out who this person is. So you have some idea about how to talk to them. That being the case, you start your conversation with something like, hey, there seems to be a breakdown of communication here. I sense some tension. Can we talk about it? Is now a good time? I mean, there's lots of ways you can get this conversation started, but you need to do that. But I think what I want you to have, what I want you to take away from this is, again, don't make it so hard. Just get the conversation started because, that's the important thing. It's always important to get something initiated because if not, then it just takes us that much longer to get the problem solved. And what tends to happen when you do that is you get other things piled on top of it. Then it becomes so layered, we don't even know where to begin. And then everybody is just kind of waiting for somebody else to blink. And why put yourself through that? Don't. Just dive into the conversation, get things started, and know that when you start, as in K-N-O-W, know that when you start, there may be a lot of stuff flying out of it, like a jack in the box. You crank the handle and then all of a sudden thing pops out and it's all this drama, excitement, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, when you initiate a conversation with somebody, especially when there's stuff that's been buried underneath, sometimes it'll just spew out. So expect a reaction. It's no big deal. This is what happens. It kind of spews out, and then it's like a soda bottle. It just comes out, and then after some of the pressure is off, then you can kind of get down to what's in the bottle instead of all the fizz. I mean, people are like that. I know we've all seen it. We probably have done it. And one of the things that I want to emphasize, because remember, you're my listener. If not, bring them to the podcast. Let them listen to it, and they can be on the same page as you are. And that's a great way to start a conversation. At least if you both have the same information, you can both kind of start from the same spot, similar perspective, and it helps to get things going. And I tend to try to discuss both sides, both positions, so that you can understand what the other person is thinking or what they're going through. Let's say if you're the person that's asking all the questions, you can kind of empathize with what the other person is going through. And if you're the person that's answering the questions, I think it's relevant to say this right now. Be careful about how you answer. Remember, it's not about always spewing out a bunch of anger. It's about answering things in a calm and rational fashion and in a way that somebody can understand you. Because a lot of times when we answer things, but if we answer it with a lot of hostility, that's not going to create a very good working relationship. In fact, that's probably one of the worst things you can do, especially with a lot of vulnerability in the room. Remember, that hostility creates a situation where people want to retreat back to the safest place. And sometimes for some people, that means not saying anything at all. And we know from experience that that doesn't work. You have to get people to open up. You have to begin to get people to trust that this conversation is about really trying to solve the problem and not about getting ammunition. And I'm going to say this to the women that are listening. See, guys have the perception, a lot of guys have the perception that when you're having one of these heart-to-heart talks, that everything that gets said that may quote-unquote be wrong, let's say it's an answer, it's not really a good one, but you're sort of thinking out loud, that kind of stuff is going to be used against you. And the fear is when you remember that kind of thing and it gets used against you, it's as if, okay, wow, I was being vulnerable. I may have misspoke. I made a misstatement or something like that, and I can't even clean it up. Remember, that's not what this is about. And I encourage people that when they've solved the problem, there's a lot of things that get said in these conversations trying to, get adjustments. Do a brain dump. Let it go. Don't carry that stuff forward as if you're going to use it for the next time to ambush somebody. Because remember, when somebody's being vulnerable, they're trying to be open. And this is a process that takes a lot of work to do it right, to do it well. People that have been in relationships a long time probably don't even need all of this help because they know how to get right to the nitty-gritty, and they pretty much know what their partner thinks. So they may have already done all of this work in their head. Boom, problem solved, and there's no issue. But for those of us that need coaching along these lines, that's why I'm giving you this information. Remember, thinking out loud is okay, and understand it for what it is. It's a thought process. It's a stream of consciousness. We're trying to drill it down to what's important. So not everything said is what is intended. So if you need clarification on what somebody means, ask them for clarification. And both partners should be okay with that. Because remember, you're both on the same team. You're trying to keep the relationship going, right? You're trying to make it work. And I absolutely forbid, it's not about ambushing the other person. And I think another thing is when things get said in the conversation, keep it to this conversation. Don't bring old facts, old stories, that old history into a conversation, because then what that tends to do, it tends to get you sidetracked. And we are not able to stay onto the problem. So again, don't make it so hard. Let's stay focused on what we're talking about here. Vulnerability is important. So that means what? It means trust is also important. It means that we're going to stick to these rules. We're going to talk about this conversation. We're not going to be dragging up other things at this time. And we're going to move forward. Thinking out loud is okay. Understand. By this time, you should understand your partner. Some people think out loud, some don't. And by doing this, hopefully we're going to come to a resolution fairly quickly. Like I say, you have to get buy-in from your partner and on both parts. And when you do that, remember, if you're a parent, realize the good example that you're setting for your kids in being able to problem solve. Some people talk with their hands. Some people are poker-faced. Everything is allowed. You get to be yourself in this. But remember that you're a team. So no shouting insults and no making faces at the other person like what they're saying isn't valid or isn't important. Because everything we say is important because we have to get stuff out there on the table, and we have to practice this. We have to practice this thing, because if you're new at it, you don't tend to get it right for a few times when it comes to problem solving. And whether it's big or small, I say practice on the little stuff, because that is sort of like gets you warmed up. So when the bigger things come along, you can handle it in a calm, rational fashion. Because you know how it is when you're trying to deal with something for the first time. You're probably not so good at it. So I'm going to take a break here, and then I'm going to come back. You're listening to John Johnson, the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And in this segment, I'm going to cover something. In the last bit, we were talking about how to problem solve. So now let's take that and go to the next part. How we're going to warm it up a bit. Let's heat it up. And how are you going to heat it up? Let's have sex. Talk with each other about things that are important and the not so important stuff. So it's not always about crisis and things. Learn to laugh with each other, and I think it's part of a bonding thing. You might want to have your personal stories that you share about each other, with each other, and stories you share about each other with other people. And I think laughing with each other is pretty important. Keep romance alive. Whatever that is for you, whether it's returning to a favorite spot where you may have met a long time ago or someplace that holds something significant. It could be there at the house or in a yard or maybe a home project that you did together. And it could have even been, like I say, you have that spot. Hey, sometimes you've been in a relationship for a while and you can remember what it was like when you had absolutely nothing. Reminiscing about that and the hard work that you've put into something in order to have what you have today. I think it's also one of those things to have a good relationship is to remember to honor each other. And I'm going to touch on that subject for a bit because I have heard from friends that I've talked with, men and women have differences, have different needs, have different thought processes. And, I talk about that all the time. And I try to emphasize that so that when you're having a conversation with someone, you can have a different listening for them. Because it's really common for us to believe that people think just like we do. You, the listener, me, myself. It's really common for me to think that someone believes the same way that I do. So when I'm making conversation or saying things, this is why I believe it's important to check in with someone on what they're hearing or what they understand that I'm saying. And couples need to do this. They need to learn to check in with each other. And after a while, you know your significant other well enough that you kind of have an idea of where their mind is going. But I always think it's good to check in because, they can change their mind. But on this part about perception and honoring your significant other, one way, and I'm going to talk about this from the man's perspective, one way in which a man feels honored, it's when his significant other takes care of her appearance. And here's an example of something that I'm sure all guys can relate to. It's when you're going out and you've gone through the trouble to plan for an evening. And believe me, I know this one because I'm not really good at planning ahead. So when I go through the effort of trying to plan ahead, now I'm generally good at getting there or being able to be in the moment and take care of the details on there. But as far as the scheduling part of that, that's what I'm generally not very good at all. And believe me, I've heard about it. So just to illustrate the point is when the evening happens and let's say we're going out, whether we're seeing a movie, whether we're going to go to the restaurant, take a drive or whatever, it's really about being prepared, taking care of your appearance so that you're pleasing to look at. I know that for some people, some women may think that that is a very trivial thing for a guy to want. Well, let me explain it from the standpoint of a man appreciates his woman when she takes the time to care about her appearance. We all experience, as guys, I'm saying, guys experience the visual of when their woman wants to hang out with her friends, how she takes care of herself. She puts herself together, she puts on her nice things, and she goes out. Well, a guy wants the same thing too, and he wants it from his woman. And obviously, he would rather have eyes for his significant other, his woman, his girlfriend, his wife, whatever words you want to use here. And I think it's important that be honored because that is a part of the relationship too. Being visually inspired. It's what helps him not only focus on you, but it's one of the reasons why he got involved with you in the first place. Men are visually attuned. It's how we approach things oftentimes. And you know what? There was nothing inherently wrong with that concept. I know we can find things wrong with it in the sense of we can corrupt the idea, but I'm not going to allow that into this conversation because what we're really talking about here is in many cases it's self-care. If you're going to go out for an evening, you need to take care of yourself so that you can not only enjoy the evening, but know that you are the object of his affection and that he wants to focus on you and make it an evening that you can not only both share, but that you can create a wonderful memory. And that is part of the experience. I know that when you have the opportunity to see your significant other looking their best, taking the time to do that, as a man, you feel honored. Because here's what also happens is when you're out in public, you know that other people see you, or irregardless of the fact of whether you might see somebody you know, but it's in being in the presence of someone who has clearly taken the time to make themselves look attractive. It's very pleasing. Because as guys, we're not going to get jealous that somebody else looks at our significant other. In fact, we're going to be proud of the fact that she turns heads. But it's the idea that she did it for us, the guy in the relationship. So women, that message is to you. It's not only about self-care. It's not just about the visual. It's not just about being sexually attractive. It is or interesting. It's really about taking the time to care about the details, because if he's made the effort, then it's nice when you make the effort as well, all around. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to talk about the flip side to that, about guys and what their responsibility is. Stay tuned.
always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And I was talking about don't make it so hard. In the last segment, I was talking about how to sort of spice up the relationship a bit, and I was giving some information / advice, suggestions on women and how they can help a guy have eyes for them and the significance of that. So in this part, I'm going to talk about the guys. I'm going to talk to you, and I want you to hear from what I believe is something to keep in mind when it comes to honoring your significant other, honoring your mate. And one of the first pieces of advice I'm going to give a guy, it's your choice of words. Listen to what you say and how you say it. I'm going to repeat that. Listen to what you say and how you say it. Women are paying attention. When you refer to yourself, especially in the company of others, do you refer to yourself as a couple, or are you just friends or hanging out or whatever? Because a woman is listening because she will take the cues from you as to how important she is based on your choice of words. Pay attention, guys, because if you want to ruin a relationship and be in the doghouse, call it something less than what it is, and you will pay the price, and deservedly so. Do not treat your woman, your significant other, less than she is worth to you, because these Freudian slips that come up say a lot about what you're thinking in your subconscious. And if the woman, let's say you're just dating her, if you think that you're going to get laid and it's going to happen, then you had better be very mindful of the fact that if that's all she's worth to you, it's going to come out, because she's paying attention to these symbols. So again, when you are in the company of others, and adjust yourself in your conversation, do not speak about her less than what she's worth to you. That's very important. Another thing, I think it's very important to recall how when we are in crowds these days, quite often people are not as nice as we can remember them having been in the past. It seems to be very common for people to be very boorish, disrespectful, not mindful of the impact that they have on those around them. Say, for example, you're on a cell phone. Now, granted, cell phone reception being what it is, these devices being what they are, sometimes people speak awful loud. And that's not really appropriate in a group setting. If you have a phone call, then you need to take that away from the group. And if you're the guy who's with someone who has a significant other and you're taking her out for a date, that phone call, if you take, had better be a real important phone call for you to take time away from your date. So I'm about having the devices silenced. Okay. You don't take calls, because really this is about you and your significant other. Treat your woman, treat your date, treat your guest first class. Treat her well, because we're trying to create good memories here. So first of all, remember, when you're in a group, You speak well about her. You speak well about the relationship, the association that the two of you have. Being kind, being courteous. And here's something that women talk about, and they use this as sort of a litmus test for guys to see what kind of guy they are. It's how they talk to servers. Meaning when you're in a restaurant, someone who is taking your order, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman who is your host or hostess, it is how do you talk to them? And if you're a guy, and if you let out your ugly side at a time like this, and there's probably appropriate times with if somebody's bullying you, yeah, you might have to, show some backbone in order to get out of that situation. But I'm talking about there are times when servers, waiters, waitresses may make a mistake in your order. How do you handle that? Do you handle that with class and with tact, or do you take it as an opportunity to bully someone? Women pay attention to that. And I think remember to be on your best behavior and make that the norm. Okay? I'm telling you as a guy, make that the norm. Being civil is important. Talking to people in a very respectful tone is important because women are paying attention to this because it's also a reflection on the woman. Because other people are watching. Just like when guys notice you have an attractive date, they're happy for you. Women are looking at a guy, and if he is treating other people terribly, they feel sorry for the woman that she's even with this guy because they figure, well, he's probably treating her the same way. You see, you get the connection? I hope you do because it's really important because people are watching. It's in the details like that. Because when you behave in a classy way, people notice. People absolutely notice. Older, younger, they all notice. Because we see lots of examples where people misbehaving. And nowadays, with all of the cameras and cell phone photographs and audio that we can record this stuff, and I mean it's on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram in an instant. So remember to be polite and respectful. It gets you so much further in life. One other thing that I would like to mention, and again, these are my own opinions, but I think for the most part, it's from a maturity standpoint. I'll mention this, and it comes about because some people like to consume alcohol, but with that, the inhibitions tend to drop. And so does the perception about your impact on other people. And by that, I mean your volume control. People that have been drinking, because they lose their inhibitions, they talk louder. Sometimes they even become bullies. And they have to get a handle on that. So if you're somebody who consumes alcohol, know what your limit is. Because it's important that you remain in control. And I would like to emphasize that being aware of your situation means having a designated driver. That's a safe thing. You go out for a while, you enjoy your evening, you create great memories, and it's something you can go back and do over and over again. It's a recipe for success in terms of your relationship. And that's what I want you to have. I want you to have a great relationship. And part of that is remembering these things that I've talked about. Look, remember, you're going out. You're going to have a good time. Dress for the occasion. Remember, when you dress up, it looks nice. Women are visual too. Believe it. And a well-dressed guy, he's going to get some heads to turn. And women always look at a guy who's well-dressed. And the woman that gets to be with the guy that's well-dressed is going to be looked favorably upon because you guys reflect each other when this sort of thing happens. So guys, remember, dress well, clean up nice, get the haircut, get the shave, do all of those things that make you look good. The things that you would have done when you were dating, trying to get the woman in the first place, keep that as part of what you do regularly, and you'll be able to keep the woman. You don't want to have any holes in your game here. Remember, keep it clean, keep it fresh, and be respectful of all of those around you, and that's great. Keep the conversation nice and lively. Speak well of your date. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I want to thank you for listening.